Hello, welcome to the Square Base Show. Ladies and gentlemen, the most exciting show we might ever make about the old world. A new army! Never released before. Oh my God. It's happening. It's happening.
Oh, who could have known?
Who could have known? Well, let's start off with listen, virtual handshake across the world. Yeah, like well done, sir, for getting it right. Congratulations to you.
All on you. Do it grinding, doing the time in all of those cafes around Nottingham, putting in the work.
Stuff.
The research.
That's tough. I want to thank the Patreons of Square Based for providing us with enough money that I could literally sit outside cafes where I know designers worked for literally days. We got
lattes aren't cheap, guys. Lattes aren't cheap.
Neither are those kind of like CSI boom arms, which I use. They're quite conspicuous, but they work. So what are we talking about? What are we talking about? Well, ladies and gentlemen, much as we have been talking about, and there's so much to break down here. Games Workshop said it wasn't happening, but in their timeline preview that's just been revealed, you say to yourself, sir, there is nothing there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, over in that bottom right-hand corner is a square. Now, you might say to yourself, it's just an empty square, Rob. Rectangle, thank you. It's just an empty rectangle. What could that mean? Well, let's just do a little bit of breaking that down. If you enhance that bad boy, you can see that is a piece of artwork from Cathay Art, which they did for the Old World. I think we should mention that. They did artwork for Cathay in the Old World, right? In this release. This is confirmed that we will be getting a Cathay army in 2025. Miniatures, army book. So much to break down, but Val, give me your initial reaction. Leave in the comments your initial reaction. What do you think?
What do I think? I've so many feelings. I actually wondered if this was maybe something that was going to happen sooner, to be honest with you, because normally new models are the sort of core driving force of everything that Games Workshop does when it comes to releases. But everything that was old was new again, I guess, and close enough. And so I was really wondering if maybe we would see Cathay sandwiched and be a little earlier before some of the core factions got released. But now, we see it's going to be on the back end of it, and it's really exciting because this is going to be the first real, completely new manifestation of Warhammer Fantasy that we have seen come out of the Old World. Like nothing really so far has been entirely new. There have been some sort of net new units that have been sort of cobbled together for the arcane journals and things like that. I guess you saw the Knights of the Round, you saw the Bone Dragon, but as far as like a fully new range, a fully new vision, this will be interesting because, well, there hasn't been a new army in Warhammer Fantasy Battles since Ogres.
Since Ogres, right? Yeah, since Ogres.
We're just going further. We're just marching further and further east.
Eventually, we'll get back to the halflings. No, all right. So, yeah, what's my initial thoughts as well? That's a great question. Dude. This is, I think, like we talked about when we talked about high elves, we talked about onboarding, right? Like what is going to make people jump in? Old World, and listen, we have been really clear about this. I know many people who watch these videos, including Val, have got a lot of Old World remember berries, and you're like, I am going to pick up those tragic mounted yeomen, much to Rob's hatred of their release. And I think, the release of those old models has done the Old World a massive disservice in many ways. The game is solid as hell. The universe is super cool. Some of those models do stand up, but many don't. That's a problem. And I definitely feel that has been a good, a criticism that people have pointed out when I've been live streaming or in YouTube comments have just been like, all those old rubbish models. This is going to be like, by the way, no one has these. This isn't some additional AOS models that you can port over. This is something cool. You've played it on Total War Warhammer, which is another point we should talk about. And here they are in their glory. And I gotta say, the minis we have seen done from Specialist Design Studio for the Old World have been stunning. I can't even begin to imagine how cool these are going to look.
they're and like I think we can probably don't have to imagine. We can just look at Total War Warhammer. I would bet that the designs are going to be more or less one for one. Yeah, because that's kind of how that license works. And famously, when Cathay came into Warhammer Total War, they talked about how they created an 8th edition army book for the Creative Assembly studio to be able to base their army on, and that's where Cathay came from in that game. It came from the Games Workshop studio.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe it came as part of the development for Old World. Maybe this stuff has been in the can for a very, very, very long time as they anticipated this release. But yeah, I don't know. It's super exciting. And the other thing that's really great about it is it gives an alternate human army, which gives another chance for because I feel like, again, human armies for me personally are the most relatable and the ones I always gravitate to. So something that's not the puffy sleeved Holy Roman Empire look of Empire, and now a more magical themed army like Cathay, I think is pretty dope. And they have their own version of technology too, which is really great. I don't know. I'm pretty stoked to see. And the floating stuff. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be wild. Yeah, definitely. And I think maybe one of the things we should talk about is Games Workshop have said that this isn't happening. This is a kind of crazy story, which even as we're recording this video, I've seen only moments after the reveal, really a few hours. I've already seen discourse online. So much so I even commented in a Facebook group, which kind of blew my heart out. I've never done it before. It's crazy. Dangerous. Because people are like, no way. And they're quoting a quote Games Workshop specifically made. I'm trying to find the date for it. Yeah. Do you have the
foreseeable future?
Yeah.
No, I seem to remember it was not for the foreseeable future, was the quote. And it's probably around a year old now. Foreseeable future for Games Workshop could literally be the end of the week at times. So I didn't take that. I took that one as a very grain of salt type thing.
So what they said was all this is available today. Fans of Warhammer the Old World should note that there aren't any current plans to bring Kislev or Grand Cathay to the tabletop for the foreseeable future. Now that's a really fair thing to say. Rob, Val, Squarebase family, they've said they're not doing this. So why do you think they're doing this? I'm like, it's clear as day. like there is no need to do an additional box unless they're giving you a teaser. And they're giving you, ladies and gentlemen, they're giving you a teaser. You've been gaslit the whole time, which is kind of crazy. I feel like that was a bit of a silly thing to do. But this now I think is going to create enough kind of counter buzz that everyone will be arguing, which I don't really go in for. But there's a lot of broken hearts, a lot of PTSD around Warhammer Fantasy, and also a lot of older a lot of gamers who are coming back to Games Workshop, or at least paying attention to Games Workshop because Old World is back, who didn't live through the 2017 to present era where Games Workshop does a ton of fan service. There were just so many things that people clamored for that Games Workshop was like, nah, we're going to do this instead for years and years and years and years, right? And so there's just a lot of people who just don't believe this. Also, rumors previously were not great. There was a lot of red herrings out there generated through a lot of good Cathay research. But Cathay rhymes with Cathay, and we were bang on the numbers for this. And anyone who doesn't think it's coming, at the very least, hopefully will be pleasantly surprised when a brand new range comes out. So I guess the next question to ask to everyone is what kind of size? So one of the things that's been interesting about seeing some of these releases is just the sheer scope of miniatures. Obviously, as Warhammer Fantasy Battle grew over its 30-year history, 40-year history, obviously tons of kits. And they've also gone back, Goblin Hewers and a bunch of other stuff.
Yes.
They've gone back and grabbed kits from the past.
Imperial Ogres,
yeah, unfortunately. So what kind of size army do you think we'll see? I think like you've said, Val's absolutely hit the nail on the head here. If you want to see what the Grand Cathay is going to look like as an army on the tabletop, and maybe a video we're going to do very soon, go look at the Total War release and look at those kits. I'm almost certain we're going to get some sort of character that turns into a dragon, terracotta giant sculpture. The balloon gun machines, not 100% certain about those, but I'm interested to see. Jade Warriors could be fun, but how many options do you think you would really want?
I mean, that's tough to know. I've never seen a fantasy rollout, although I have been going back and reviewing and reading through 7th edition army books, and it was actually pretty fascinating to me to see how much growth there were in the ranges between 7th and 8th edition. Granted, that is a 10-year time frame. But I think with the way Games Workshop tends to release new armies, you don't get the full thing up front. So Cathay will probably be a pretty tight roster, I would have to assume, with sort of a sprinkling of everything before a second wave release comes a number of years down the road. That would be my guess. So I don't know. You'd probably have some core infantry, some elite infantry, some cavalry. A monster, a couple characters. That's probably what you're looking at, I would say, for an initial wave of Cathay.
Yeah, it would have to be fairly thin, I think, because that still would be, like you say, a huge release. Even painting it all up, getting it all on the tabletop, that's going to take a significant amount of time. Another question from me as well is, with these re-released models that we've seen, you've had really good value. Like they've re-released Warriors of Chaos. You get a ton in a box. Do you think this might be the first time we see the kind of classic, fairly inflated price for these? Because I could definitely see the justification for hey, these are new. These didn't exist. It's time to pay up. Or we did get from Bretonian Foot Knights. They were a pretty good deal. They're not. I can't remember if they're 10 or 20 in Foot Knights. I think they're 20. So. I think that's the benchmark right there. Would be with those, and also I think when you look at the infantry in something like Horus Heresy, I think you also still get a fair amount more in your sort of infantry boxes than you would compared to the main studio. SDS I feel like undercuts the studio with their plastics, and then maybe make it up the difference a little bit with their specialty resin sculpts and things like that. But again, I mean, when we're talking about unit, when we're talking about the actual cost of production, the price difference between making a box of 20 versus a box of 40 is, probably the biggest difference is the amount you have to pay in cardboard for the bigger box, right? Like it's like the input once you actually have the stuff isn't a big deal. It's just a question of how they price it. And I would say, the Knights of the Realm is a really good example of probably the scale that you would see in those boxes, but a good thought nonetheless. So the last couple of thoughts before we go, and I think this one is a major one, is this is pretty bold of them as well. The sculpts that they've been doing have been brilliant, but to say that we're going to release this sometime in the future and give 3D designers the opportunity to create whole ranges to put on the tabletop, people can start painting, getting units ready before even a release happens. That's pretty bold, right? As a decision.
Yeah, they're pretty. And honestly, this is something that I think I like to see from Games Workshop, which is don't give a shit. Like actually, if you look at the SDS model, it competes on price versus, I would say, certainly if you're not personally 3D printing things and you have to buy stuff off of Etsy, buying the plastic re-release kits is a pretty decent value proposition. It's not if you look at compared to Perry Miniature and other historical options. It's still a premium product, but they are competitive. I really appreciate how they seem to approach it. They're not afraid to put rules for models that don't exist in books because someone might either make something themselves or kit bash it out of other elements from Games Workshop. They don't have this this driven need to have the exact the unit that you buy in the box is exactly the unit you put on the table that you see in 40K and AOS. There's a little bit more trust for its customers to buy the things that they want, and I think that's great. That shows confidence and doesn't treat me like a chump. I can choose sort of how I want to make my armies, and Games Workshop gets a ton of dough out of me as a result. Not 100% of the dough. I source models from all kinds of different places, but I don't feel like the only time I feel like a complete loser when I'm buying stuff for Old World is probably their reference cards. That's about it. But that's on me. That's my choice.
Okay, last point to kind of round us off here, and do let us know in the comments below what you're thinking. Is, again, I don't think I can express this enough, how absolutely insane this is.
It's really cool.
This is so cool, but it's wild. They said it wasn't happening. It's now happening. They've telegraphed it's happening. I'm blown away. And also because for you and me, I run events, you run events. We're super pumped about getting more people into the Old World. That's kind of the point of what Square Based is. This is an onboarding. This is crazy.
It's a very big opportunity to now start expanding the base of the game beyond just the Remember Berries nostalgia crowd, which quite frankly, I think Old World has already accomplished. I think that's what they didn't expect. They didn't expect people to come into the Games Workshop fold through Old World.
They said that in the articles, right? Just like you said.
Blatantly said, don't do it. Yeah. They said blatantly said, don't do this. You don't want this. This is old. It's finicky. It's tough. Meanwhile, SES has quietly gone back and redesigned a lot of those dumb old miniatures to be in resin so that they fit together properly and that they don't require an engineering degree to put together, or at least the ability to pin stuff and learn all these skills for handling old minis. I think the future is super bright for Old World. I think if it is comboed with sort of a you might even call it a 1.0 or a 2.0 sort of redevelopment of the rules, maybe this is the real beginning of Old World coming into form. And again, that vision of where do the designers want to take this game? We're going to see when they actually create an entire thing from scratch. And that's not just that's not just the models on the table, but lore behind it is fairly undeveloped, fairly black box, I would assume. There's not a ton out there about Cathay in comparison to something like the Empire or High Elves and things like that. This is really, really exciting, and how they fit into the story. One downside, one downer thing, and I assume I'm going to blame marketing for the marketing department for this, but one of the reasons they gave for the 9 core factions was this is a game focused on the Old World, the Border Princes. This is a very specific time and place.
Yeah, and
what we haven't seen in the development of the game as it's rolled out is that being a fact at all. In fact, we've seen most of the arcane journals will have like a scenario or something that's tied to that region. But the lore and stuff that you read, all of that is all still just very much the big world of Warhammer fantasy. This isn't locked to the geographic region of the Old World. And Cathay, is one of the most removed places from the Old World. On the other side of the continent. So it's interesting to see how they fit Cathay in. Are they just an adversary of some of the chaotic tribes coming down from the north? Do they make contact and somehow are relating to the Empire? Because as far as like lore goes, I don't think they're not a very present faction in existing lore. And now you've opened up sort of that whole eastern side of the map, which is really, really cool. And I don't know. I can't wait to see how it all slots together.
I think also people will be frustrated. Why are you releasing Cathay? Why aren't you bringing in my lizard men, my ogres, my Skaven, like my vampire counts? Why aren't you bringing in my armies that have existed for a long time? Why are you bringing out something new? But we are dealing with SDS, and they are led by Tony, and Tony has a rule. He says, that's cool, and then it gets done. So good luck to all of us.
And hey, I honestly, like I said, I'm surprised that this hasn't come sooner. To be quite frank, especially with all of the like bummed out opinions about old minis, and this is just rehashing. It's just nostalgia and all that. To actually invest in the creation of a new army, I think that really speaks to the legs that the game has. For those, I don't know how many doubters there are at this point of Old World sticking around and not just being a sort of one and done edition, something that gets put in the back of the catalog next to Middle Earth Fantasy Battles or whatever it's called, or Middle Earth the Middle Earth games. I think a lot of people were worried that sort of hands off, it's here, you can buy it if you want it, sort of approach to the game was what would happen to Old World. Old World looks, with something like this, to be very front and center. Certainly up there with Horus Heresy and Necromunda, as far as like the future focus of the studio, which is cool.
Yeah, I think this has the potential to hit Horus Heresy numbers, and as I've said previously, maybe eclipse it.
If it's not already. If it's not already, we don't get to see that, but we don't know what the comparison would be. Certainly, nothing looks like it's outperforming Necromunda based on output of stuff. But I think they've tapped a vein that we called. We tap dance, guys. Not that we're tooting our own horns constantly in this, but Rob is, and so am I. Obviously, yeah, definitely me too. But we were here for a year before Old World came out, right? We did a year of shows before Old World came out, talking about how this was going to be a really cool big deal, and there were a lot of naysayers and haters saying that there's just no way. And I understand where that comes from and why that would be, but I don't know. Old World's so cool. It is a great IP. It is a lot of fun to immerse yourself in, and the game is sick. So yeah, I'm happy to see that the future looks bright, and yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments what you think. Thanks everyone for tuning in. See you soon. Stay square best.